Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. A few introductory words to our streaming community and all of you who are visiting with us. We welcome you. We're glad that those who are here via our streaming ministry could be with us. Welcome to you. And for those of you who are visiting, welcome to you. We would love it if all of you would avail yourselves of our red welcome table. It has red welcome bags containing brochures about all the different ministries of All Saints Church. If you would like to be on our mailing list, every Thursday we send out thousands of emails in a blast telling about what we're going to be doing here on Sunday morning in the Rector's Forum and in church. We would love for you, if you're streaming, to send us a word through email or to call us. And for those of you who are in the room, there are green sign-up sheets on the notepads over there, and we would love for you to, on clipboards, and we would love for you to do that. Today we focus on the rector's search. Things are going very well. It's one of the hardest working groups of ministers, lay ministers in the entire parish. They've been meeting an untold number of hours, and they've reached a wonderful milestone. And I'm pretty much in the dark, too, about what's going on, and that's awfully appropriate. And we all thought that it would really be great if we could have a report from the rector's search now that they are at this point. 3 members of the search committee will report, but it will be introduced and facilitated by one of the co-chairs of our Rector Search Committee. So without further ado, will you warmly welcome to the podium Gloria Pitzer.
Okay. Good morning. My co-chair, how do you do this? Okay, there we go. They didn't choose me as a co-chair because of my technological capabilities or my height. My co-chair, Bob Long, is currently bicycling across the length of the Continental Divide as we speak. So the bad news is we don't have his clear, articulate presence here this morning. The good news is I have no Continental Divide jokes in my repertoire. Though I'm sure there's a great allegory that Susan Russell could come up with about the Episcopal Church and the Continental Divide. Here's our plan this morning. I'm going to give you an update on where we are in our rector search process. MaryAnn Ahart will be reporting on the results of the focus groups, and Rahilly will report on the parish survey. I was planning to use PowerPoint slides like MaryAnn and Charlie, but not only do I suffer from a paucity of PowerPoint proficiency, actually I do know one PowerPoint trick. And all the slides I actually wanted to use constituted numerous copyright violations, and my legal defense isn't considered a valid expenditure from the rector search budget. So my one slide is the front cover of our soon-to-be produced Amazing Parish Profile. First off, my initial cloning plan that I had suggested in my report to the annual meeting in February has not quite panned out. So we've taken a slightly different tack in our search for the new rector. During March and April, the committee conducted over 40 focus groups, which included the participation of over 350 parishioners. Many of you here participated in those groups and provided valuable and thoughtful input and responses. And MaryAnn will be speaking to the results of that work. During April, an all-parish survey was completed by over 850 people, and Charlie will be reporting on those results. Armed with input we received from those focus groups and the survey, we created our parish profile, a document which will be used to inform potential candidates and others about All Saints, its rich history and ministries, the values that underlie it all, and the qualities that we are seeking in a new rector. The finished document is at the printer as we speak, and we expect to have the printed copies by next week. We'll be posting a digital copy of that on our profile, and so the website will be accessible to everyone to see the parish profile. The work of that committee, Bob Long, Jason Lyon, and Diana Carbajal, with assistance from our finance chair, Chris Caldwell, and with the assistance of Keith Holman and Ann Peterson in putting the finished product together, was extraordinary. But I really want to hold up and publicly thank the amazing Mindy Estrada, who weaved it all together, did all the graphic design and art direction under extremely tight deadlines. I know that you'll find it to be an exciting statement of what this place is all about. We're currently in the process of preparing the necessary paperwork to post the job through the Diocese of Los Angeles and the National Church, and expect to complete that by the end of this month. I anticipate that after that we will begin receiving inquiries and resumes, lots and lots and lots of resumes. Having said that, it's our belief that the best way for us to identify strong prospective candidates from around the country is for us to go out and find them. Our strongest candidates are probably going to be priests, and last I checked, it does need to be a priest, who are doing well and are happy in their current positions and aren't even considering applying for a new position. Bob Long and I traveled to the East Coast a couple of weeks ago, Washington, D.C., Boston, and New York. We interviewed bishops, cathedral deans, deans of Episcopal seminaries, deployment officers, and other clergy to get input and names of priests who might fit our profile. I learned some valuable things on that trip. First, All Saints is considered unique in the Episcopal Church and held in extremely high regard, except maybe in Texas. Second, we are conducting our search in a way that is very different from the typical rector search in the Episcopal Church. But those we spoke to felt that it was the right process for us. And third, Uber is amazing. Our senior warden, Kathy Keg, and I will be traveling to the General Convention in Salt Lake City at the end of this month with our newly minted parish profile in hand, where we're arranging meetings with other knowledgeable people in the church about potential candidates that we should be considering. From all of this input, we are putting together our list of prospects, which will be developed, expanded, researched over the summer. We expect to begin a process of visiting, interviewing, listening to, and learning about potential candidates over the fall, and hope to move towards a selection to present to the vestry in early 2016 in order to have a new rector hired by Ed's planned retirement in May 2016. Now, we do have a backup plan in place. I read about the discovery and creation of this elixir that actually reverses the aging process. This is such an amazing discovery that there was a whole page ad on it in the newspaper. So Ed has been taking this for the last 2 months. And don't worry, as part of the disclosures, they say that you actually look older before you start looking younger. So we have all our bases covered. MaryAnn Ahart.
Right, okay. So I bring you the greetings from the focus group subcommittee. Kathy Keg, Terry Knowles, Nancy Necker, Trula Worthy Clayton, and myself were the committee. We started out smaller, but then we found we just couldn't live without some of the others, and so we just kept adding on. First of all, thank you for all of you for participating. We had an amazing response. We had 43 focus groups. Some of those were the Children's Chapel that we'll talk about intermittently. We had a total attendance of 365 people. Some of those were duplicates. We had some people who went to an all-parish event and then wanted to also be with their ministry. So we have several people who showed up, we think, not more than twice, unless they really, really liked it. The groups. So let me say before I start this that our goal as the subcommittee for focus groups was to hear the stories in a venue that allowed people to talk together. And we got to focus the conversation, but we got to hear them share their stories and share their experiences together, which was a real joy for us to be able to do this. Our focus on these is to find out what we want for the future and what we're looking for in the new rector. So the questions are all future-focused, and the whole orientation of the focus groups is future-focused. So parishioners participated in the focus groups in one of two ways. Either they were in a standing ministry, or they were in one of the all-parish sessions where we had multiple sessions going on at one time. The Spanish service had their separate group, and it was important to have the ministries participate as ministries, because in a systems thinking, you want to see the system from as many different positions as possible. So we'd say, oh, here's what it looks like from here, and then, it looks a little different over here, and this person sees it totally different, or this ministry. So it was really important for us to see the whole system. Confidentiality was maintained. At no point is there any attribution of what someone said in the notes. So that's, if you said something and you're worried about someone else ever hearing about it, that you said it, that won't happen. The demographics, as you can see, are pretty representative of what the church looks like. If you notice, especially in the age groups, that the bulk is from 41 to 75, which is probably pretty representative of who we are as a parish, and the same thing with our racial breakdown. So we were looking for common themes, we were looking for patterns, we were looking for trends, and that's where we focused on. Some issues were raised that were not applicable to the search. So in one case, in some cases, we took them to Nancy Necker's group, the Transitional Life Committee, and in other instances, we took them to Ed. Because they were current issues. So for instance, with the Transitional Life Committee, we had people saying to us, I came here because of Ed. I've never gone to another church where I felt safe. I don't know that I'll feel safe with a new person. Or ministries who said to us, what will our ministry look like with a new rector? So those things are going to the Transitional Life Committee. To Ed, we took things like, people really want to know what's going to happen with the building project in this new iteration, or what's going to happen between now and the time you leave. When are you actually leaving? So those are the types of things that have been distributed to other people because they were not ours. Each focus group responded to the same 4 questions, and they are the questions we started with as a search committee when we had our first retreat back in January. So here are the 4 questions for those of you who were not at a search committee. The first is, what are the essential qualities or values that are non-negotiable? No matter who shows up, no matter what happens, these are the values that we hang on to. What areas would you like to see enhanced or emphasized? And then what qualities do we want in a new rector? The 4th question, what else do you want us to know? All of those answers actually went back up into one of the first 3 that people thought about and then had second thoughts about. So there is no separate reporting on the 4th question. So the first question, what are those essential values? Inclusiveness came up first in almost every single focus group. Isn't that interesting? And we are really clear that we are an inclusive church. The language that we saw was welcoming to all, unconditional love, interfaith, welcoming diversity. But that just was very heartening. The second was peace and justice and our stand on that and our work in that area. We use the term social justice as well as peace and justice. The larger community owns the peace and justice work. And the thing that we were most appreciated for or proud of as a parish was our boldness and our risk-taking around those issues. And then the third one is adult education. And this was just as strong. So these top three just came out very, very strong. And that was mentioned as much as social issues. Interestingly, people talked about that's transformation was happening in our educational forums. People said things like, All Saints is a place to learn, to question, and to be challenged intellectually. And we want to learn all of it. So whatever we're looking for in their next iteration of this, it has to include the intellectual, the challenging, the questioning. And then the next one, progressive theology and spirituality, was sort of a complex one because we liked both the progressive theology, especially people said God has many faces, Jesus is not the only way, and at the same time, we very much value the traditional Episcopalian rituals and traditions. Interesting. So someone came up with the term progressive traditionalism, which I liked. That sort of balances them both. And people said, while we're progressive theologically, we're not afraid to talk about Jesus. So there's really good feelings about that. And then, of course, the music program came up very strongly, that people see it as a part of the fabric of who we are. The children's program, of course, came up, and the variety of music was valued. In Children's Chapel, the question we asked was, what do you really value about All Saints? Now, we're talking about K through 5 here, right? And we got a lot of inclusiveness and love. And people saying, it's not okay to hate people who are different from you and things like that. My personal favorite was the little one who said, my favorite time, though, is when we go up to the altar and the adults drink the beer. I loved it. And then there was this little whisper, it's wine. So we know which one was raised Episcopalian, right? And which one is... Okay. So what areas do we want to see emphasized or enhanced? Pastoral care came up. Again, this was a complex answer because while we really valued pastoral care, there was a sense that it needed to be spread across all clergy, that it needed to include more lay people, and that we needed to increase how we cared for each other, how we built a caring community. So that was interesting. All through here, we got a balance of we love being a peace and justice church, and we want to pay more attention to how we take care of ourselves internally. So this is where that showed up. The CYF, two things. One, increase the number of young people. Every church in the world is trying, well, I guess not every, but most of the churches in the world are trying to figure out how do we attract the younger people. The second issue is how do we have a Sunday morning program that the kids want to come to? So they love the music, the Wednesday night, the Seekers, the Acolyte program. Those are all very successful. The actual Sunday morning is when we heard that the parents were having trouble getting their kids to come. In community and community fellowship, again, this was a two-sided issue. One issue said, there are so many needs here in Pasadena that we wish we were paying more attention to the immediate needs, taking care of our community and reaching out that way. And then the other was, we need to be developing our own internal community here and taking care of each other again. Transparency and less bureaucracy, not surprisingly, there is a sense that there are a few people who know what's going on and that the people who don't know what's going on are not getting enough communication so that they don't actually understand all of the decisions that are being made or even know some of the decisions. So the question is, how do we include more people and how do we get those decisions that are being made communicated better out to everyone? Accessibility of the rector. Again, this is not surprising. Every large organization wants more accessibility from the head of the organization. So specifically, everyone in the world who goes to All Saints and goes to a ministry wants Ed 24/7. There you go, Ed. So just take those pills because we need it. So, But this is an issue that we need to keep thinking about, and so it's really a question of how do we ask that person to expend time? And then the peace and justice. Again, interestingly, because across the board, we love being the Peace and Justice Church, what I found most encouraging and intriguing was people were saying our staff does a great job of peace and justice. We have a few ministries who do a great job of peace and justice. We want the chance to have our feet on the ground. We want to be more active in the peace and justice work out in the world. Interesting. I thought it was very good. The children, when we asked them what they would like, wanted better snacks. Donuts were a big thing. They wanted more art supplies, which I thought was good. And, wait for it, they wanted to replace the building with a giant water slide, which Jason thought had some real implications for baptismal things. So that's it. Right. And Jason is your junior warden, I'm just saying. Okay. So what qualities do we want in a new rector? Number one, to be our spiritual leader, and that just came out so strong. We want the spiritual guide who not only leads us, joins us in the journey, learns with us, but it's really about being the spiritual leader. Number two, being intelligent, be curious, be growing. But the intelligence was just named that. We need an intelligent leader. Good administrative skills to manage the staff well and be fiscally responsible. I mean, everyone is very aware that this is a large corporation, in essence, that has to be run. To be a good preacher. Some people said this was the deal breaker, right? They had to be able to come to church on Sunday and hear a sermon that just put fire in their belly or whatever they were saying. Have fundraising knowledge and experience, not be afraid to do the ask. Be accessible to all. To live with high energy and with humor. And humor came up consistently across everything. So I think it may be your influence, my friend. And then to value diversity and value all of the things that we value. Everywhere we heard, please be open to looking beyond male, white, and straight. And that was absolutely across the board, which I thought was really wonderful. People said we need someone who has experience in these areas, not just a passion for them, not just having read about them or talked about them, but really had their feet on the ground and had done the things that we believed in. We want someone who will grow with us on the journey and have to share the passion of what we consider our DNA values. My favorite quotation around this was in one of the ministries. As we finished this discussion, someone said, "Oh my gosh, we're looking for Jesus." And without missing a beat, the leader said, "Or his sister." We are so good. Okay, so what did we learn beyond the answers to these three questions? Number one, that people really love this church. You could tell from the way they were answering, they had been thinking about these things. Many of them said that they were praying for us, they were praying for the process, they were praying for the church, and we were very touched by that. That we are united around core values and beliefs. We really do have a center that holds tight. We do differ on what that looks like when we start to live it out, when those values are, quote, on their feet and walking around. That is not surprising for a group of people who are 4,000 strong. We should have diversity. We should have heated and lively discussions about what that looks like. The participants benefited from this process, and almost without exception, they all said, could we do this again sometime? Could we do this soon? This was really important. Not only because they got to talk about the issues, but because they got to talk to each other and about this very focused thing. And the bonus for us was that we got to meet some really fabulous people. We are an amazing parish. And we now know people we didn't know before. People know people they didn't know before. Mostly, we want to thank you for your thoughts, for your time, for your efforts on this, because it then allowed us to go to the next step, which is the profile, and then on to the next step, which is the interview process. So thank you so much. Charlie.
Thanks a lot. So MaryAnn talked a lot about the qualitative aspects of reaching out. Oh, there we go. A little more amplification. Rarely needed in my case. So MaryAnn talked about a lot of the qualitative aspects. I'm going to focus on more of the quantitative aspects. You know, the survey was composed of places that had open-ended questions where people shared thoughts that are, you know, fully in alignment and really amplify what MaryAnn talked about. But I'm going to run through sort of the quantitative findings that we have. The survey subcommittee was made up of Antonio Gallardo, Kathy Kaag, Emily Dossett, and Tony Jackson. I am merely the digital scribe for the process. These guys did all of the hard work of thinking through the themes that MaryAnn talked about, that the Rector Search Committee overall had talked about in our initial retreat. If we think about the themes, the profile of the respondents, really understanding who responded to the survey is an important filter to go through before we start looking at the results that come, out of the questions that we've asked. Also, we thought it was important to understand the participation. Where are people engaging with the church? You know, what are their activities? Where do they feel themselves aligning? From a ministry's perspective, wanted to find out, what do people hold up with high importance? What does that look like on a relative basis? And then how do people assess the performance or execution around that? And that holds true for values as well. Then we took a look at, this is an opportunity to say to people, well, why do I attend? What draws people in? Where do they feel connected? So we have some information around what attracts people and how they participate. And then lastly, what are those qualities that people are seeking in the rector? So as Gloria shared, during the month of April, we had the survey open for everybody. We use a combination of ways of reaching out through this Rector Search Update email that goes out to the 4,000 plus email addresses we have on file, and likely all of you, many of you, replied to the survey via the links there. We had in-church greetings inviting people to go to the website. We also had paper surveys for anybody who didn't have access to a computer or chose to do a manual one. And that was also on the website during that whole period and was mentioned in This Week at All Saints each week. We received over 900 responses, 21 in Spanish, the balance in English. So jumping into the profile data. When we asked the question about who am I, we gave people the choice to respond or not. About 84% of people chose to supply that information. On the am I a member question, 86% of people identified as members here, 11% of respondents identified as not, and a few people weren't quite sure whether they were or not. When we look at the amount of time or tenure that people have been attending, a lot of very, very seasoned members. If we look at 11 plus years, it's over half, approaching 61%. And then a good mix of people who, like me, are sort of in that 4 to 10 range. And then, a number of relatively newcomers, people 3 years or less. Age, where we had very specific outreach to children and younger people with regard to the focus groups. The survey was a more self-selection, self-entry type thing. And our profile is a little bit older here. 90+% of our respondents are 41 years or older. Kind of hold that in your head as we look at some of the responses, because I think it's a life phase kind of issue that people are answering questions from, particularly around children, youth, and families. People that may have had children, their children have grown, they're empty nesters, that may not have direct awareness of the current CYF program, but feel it's important, but don't have current knowledge to make an evaluation around it. That would be an example there. Marital status, a mix of singles, married people, separated people, partnered but not married people. Gender, I think it's pretty evident that the women of this church really engage in a very deep level, and over half of the respondents, over 60% of the respondents are female, and the balance male, and some people identifying in other ways. With regard to orientation, almost 80% straight, If you look at sort of the gay and lesbian representation, I mean, pushing 20%, you're indexing at like 10x, the population, nearly 10x. So super representation there. And shout out to all the people down on Santa Monica Boulevard that I'm missing the street Eucharist today to be here. Always a fun time proclaiming the good news in the streets. Bisexual, and then people that identify as other. When we look at sort of ethnicity, this profile, I think, is what we would sort of project and think, what our parish looks like. I think the way to think about an ethnic profile is to compare us to, say, Pasadena overall. Pasadena overall is about 55% white, a third Latino, about 10% African American, 12% to 15% Asian. So if we don't look quite like the community, I think is the way to maybe think about this here. We think about the distance, how big is the community, and just sort of a physical way, where do people come from? We're pretty close to a community church with, nearly 80% or 70% of the parish coming from within 10 miles, and then out to the 10 to 20 mile area, and then some people coming a really long ways, over 10% of the respondents saying they come from over 30 miles. Now here, this kind of goes back to my comment about the age profile, and do I have children or dependents at home? And I think if you think about probably people who are in their 20s to 40, early 40s, the percentage of people with children in the home is probably a lot higher than 26%. But when we look at the age profile and sort of the respondent base overall, we only have about a quarter of the respondents with children or dependents at home. On this chart, the green is yes, they participate, the children or dependents participate in this particular part of the church, and blue is no. So I would say here, when you look, the number one area of participation is in service. Interestingly, almost 40% of kids don't end up coming to service. Sunday school, a little over a third of children are participating in Sunday school. The youth groups, almost 30% participating in weekly youth group, and then choir, a little over a fifth, or almost a quarter of people with children are participating there. So we'd see that there's probably some opportunities around that. And then we asked a generalized question about where are those places that you participate, in church life, and how do you describe it, and sort of check all those that apply. For some reason, I couldn't get this graph to render. It kept putting the biggest number at the bottom, and attending services, over 90% of respondents say, hey, they are involved in the church by attending services. I think very encouragingly, over 2/3 attend other non-service functions here. So that's really great. And then half the respondents saying that they participate in programs that the church is working on, so actively working, in the ministries of the church. And then a really great number, I think, is people are really using sort of the online capability to connect, with almost 40%. Then we look at sort of the giving, or the people's income profiles. If you look at this, again, relative to Pasadena, probably a little higher income overall, with nearly 60% falling in that $50,000 to $200,000 range in terms of annual income. So then ministries, sort of people's gradings of importance, and then their assessment of execution. The way this question was asked, if we look to the right on this chart, were the different areas of ministry of the church. So worship, connecting with the broader community, congregational life, adult education, giving stewardship, administration, sort of the business of the church, and then lastly, children, youth, and families. And then these were the gradients that people were able to respond, from not important to very important. And I think, again, unsurprisingly, worship came out at the top with, we have 909 respondents. 826 of those respondents said that worship is either very important or important. So I would say it's sort of a passion or intensity score there. Followed by connecting with the broader community, congregational life, adult education, giving stewardship, administration, and children, youth, and families. Again, I think it's wrong to conclude that people don't think that children, youth, and families is wrong or is unimportant. I think it's more related to that bottom right corner, and that column is I don't know. Somebody may not have current exposure or involvement, and I think that's what's driving that answer. So if we take sort of the rankings there and we say, okay, these are the things that are really important, ranked from the most important, or sort of as voted on as the most important to the lesser important. And then let's see how well are we executing against those. You see, out of 826 who are saying, hey, this is either important or very important to me, 823, and doesn't necessarily have to be the same people, but are rating the execution as good or great. Connecting with the broader community, again, very high scoring. And congregational life, adult education. MaryAnn emphasized that. That's another theme that through the comments and through the survey, the opportunity to come together here and learn about the world, through the lens of All Saints and in a broader way is important to people. And it does, as I say, administration and children, youth, and families may be one of those places where people don't have current exposure, and so it's not that it's unimportant to them, they just don't know or don't have an involvement around it. That's sort of my interpretation of that. We asked a question around focus. Does the church have a clear focus? 80% effectively say, hey, there is, I understand what we're here and doing. Values. This one's a little bit of an eye chart, so I'll kind of walk through slowly. We start on the left. We asked for people to express the 3 most important values at All Saints. And so I tried to there are pretty clear breaks in the numbers. If you look at the red box numbers, sort of in the 400s at the top, and then they sort of break into those ranges. And if we look at the top 2, the love one another teachings or values of All Saints really comes through. And strong emphasis on social justice or peace and justice. As we saw in the focus groups, those comments come through clearly and loudly here. So again, very, very important to people, and the assessment that, hey, there's a lot going on and the execution is pretty strong. And then as we move to the green, the middle, there's still pretty high importance. I mean, you're talking about 3/4 the number of people at the most important, the highest number of responses in that middle box. Diversity, interfaith understanding and connection, this progressive traditionalism, willing to consider tradition and to question it where appropriate. Again, very high good and great scores. Things that are important to people and people feeling as though they're being executed well. Willingness to consider tradition and question where appropriate, and then care for the poor. That's started to come down in terms of level of importance, and yet maintaining pretty good and great scores. And then lastly, biblical interpretation and then environmental stewardship fell down in terms of sort of the intensity that people were responding, maintaining pretty good and great scores there. Kind of added these little red circles. If we look at the places where there's sort of, where are we getting sort of a high number of not well or okay, which may indicate that there's some opportunity. Care for the poor, this biblical interpretation question, and environmental stewardship. If we look at sort of the distribution of the execution, people's assessment of the execution, those would be the 3 that said, where we're sort of weighted to the left a little bit. So why people attend and where are they participating? This one's really tough. I couldn't really figure out a way to render this that would give the meaning and be readable. But this ranks all the different reasons that people have given for attending based on the number of respondents. And number 1, with 440 responses, was inclusive and diverse. So again, very much echoing what we learned in the focus groups. I feel spiritually nourished, number 2 at 386. I experience music at the services that is rich and expertly executed at 375. I feel enriched by the preaching and All Saints puts peace and justice of the Bible into practice and work. So all of those have 318 or more respondents. And so I drew that red line because then it drops down to 166. Here we were asking for people to express the 3 most important things. So I think those top 5 really talk about the things that move people and bring them here and keep them coming. And then lastly, what are the qualities that people are seeking and believe we need in a new rector? Number 1, with 583 respondents, strong preaching and speaking skills. Number 2, this concept of being intellectually alive and challenging and connected to the world at 562. So if we sort of think about Anglicanism and the spirituality and learning, and then sort of the incarnational experience of being alive in the world and putting that faith into action and experiencing the world and sort of, heaven on earth, really an expression there. Has charisma, warmth, and empathy, sort of an interesting balance of words there, and true spiritual leader. From there, that's sort of 500 and more responses above the red line. And then very close, at 405 is this commitment to social justice, and then, a variety of the other aspects. So that's where we are. We'll give a couple minutes for questions.
So the microphones are coming. You all know the drill. Let's get mics in hands so we're ready to go from one to the other in that we only have 5 minutes. Let me ask all 3 presenters to come up. And go ahead, Nancy, if you'll start with the first question.
Yes, my question is to Gloria. You mentioned early on that we were going about this procedure differently. Would you mention at least the most important differences and why we've chosen that?
Well, one of the 2 main differences. Number 1, in the vast majority of rector changes in the Episcopal Church, it is very untypical to have the new rector come right on the heels of the retiring rector. So there is normally a time period of a year with an interim rector in position. We had gone through the immediate transition when we brought Ed on 20 years ago, and that seemed to work very well for a church of this size. To bring in an interim to manage a $5 million budget for a period of time was not felt to be helpful, that we felt that would lose momentum. The second difference is in the way we are conducting the search. In the vast majority of Episcopal searches, the diocese presents potential candidates to the search committee. It is unusual for a search committee to actually go out and physically do the research and look for a new potential rector, someone that may not have their resume at the national church in whatever box they put it in for people that are looking for a new position. So those are the 2 major differences that we are dealing with in conducting this search.
This is just a quick question. Will this PowerPoint be posted on the website?
Well,
Thank
the
you.
entire video will be.
Oh.
Yes.
Right, but I think some people might want to just look at the slides. I was asked by someone who had to leave, and I thought I would advocate for them.
Yes, we'll do that.
So that does complement the comprehensiveness of the presentation. MaryAnn, wrap it up.
I forgot to thank, that we had 31 people who led these groups, the focus groups, and they were amazing. They had to go through training and they had to show up at odd hours of the day and night, and they were absolutely fabulous. MaryAnn kept us together, and then Greg Adams is the one who sat down with us and helped us make sense. So there were a lot of people involved in it. Thanks.
Thanks to the search committee. Thank you.